So with the NFL season winding down, conference championship weekend is here. I wanted to make a video talking about every team's most surprising or just biggest breakout player of the 2024 NFL season. And these are guys that just went up a level this year. Maybe they were just like a practice squad or special teams player. Now they're just a mainstay on the defensive side or offensive side of the field. Or maybe they were somebody that had decent expectations going into the year and they shattered those expectations and they went up a tier. So maybe they just went from a really good player to a superstar. That is a breakout player as well. So let's hop right into this. I want to talk about the Arizona Cardinals first. I'm going to talk about their tight end that I think went up a tier into the tier 1 of tight ends in the NFL, and that is Trey McBride. You could also say last year was a breakout year for Trey McBride because in 2022 to 2023, from his rookie to sophomore year, he went from 265 receiving yards to 825 receiving yards. Well, he went up another tier this year. He got 41 more targets, going from 106 in 2023 to 147 in 2024. He got 30 more receptions this year, 111 on the year for a tight end, and 1,146 yards. It was a running joke throughout the year that Trey McBride was never going to get a receiving touchdown. He ended up getting it in one of the final weeks of the season, but he was a Pro Bowler. Unfortunately, not an All-Pro, but he definitely turned himself into the best receiving weapon for Kyler Murray this year, and he was better than Marvin Harrison Jr. in just a pure receiving aspect, and someone that just had a 75 catching percentage, 71 yards per game, and kind of an underwhelming offense going into the year relative to the Arizona Cardinals expectations in year 2 with Jonathan Gannon and Kyler Murray fully healthy now. But in my opinion, Trey McBride went up a tier this year, going into that tier 1 level of tight ends. I was torn here for the Atlanta Falcons. You can go with either one of these guys. I'm not going to go with Bijan Robinson because you maybe were like, all right, should the Falcons have taken him in the top 10 in the 2023 draft? And he broke out this year to being one of the best running backs in the NFL. And maybe that was an Arthur Smith offensive coordinator thing, just giving way too many touches to Tyler Algier. But I'm going to go with Drake London, who I think has emerged into one of the best receivers in the NFL. This is definitely the best quarterback play he's had in his career. And I know Kirk Cousins didn't have a great year, but the bar was very low for the Atlanta Falcons in their quarterback play over the last 2 years. Just watching Taylor Heineke, Desmond Ridder, it wasn't pretty in Atlanta whatsoever. And London shattered career highs across the board. His career high in receptions was his rookie season where he had 72. Well, he had 100 receptions this year. He had a career high 158 targets, 1,271 receiving yards, 9 receiving touchdowns. He averaged 75 receiving yards per game and is still just 23 years old. And I think it's similar to what I talked about with Trey McBride going up a tier in terms of receiver. I don't think he's a tier 1 receiver because that's like your Jamar Chase, your Justin Jeffersons, your CeeDee Lambs of the world. But I think Drake London is comfortably in tier number 2, and I'm excited to watch him and Michael Penix throughout a full regular season next year because I think they can have a good connection for a long time. And it's funny, Michael Penix was just drafted and he's older than Drake London. For the Baltimore Ravens, we're going to talk about somebody that was undrafted in the 2021 NFL draft, and that is going to be the new safety for them, Darius Washington. Man, Baltimore did it again. This late round find and moving him to a full-time safety position was such the right move for Zachary or the defensive coordinator in this Ravens defense as a whole. This year, he played 177 snaps in the box, 166 snaps as a slot corner, but 469 snaps as a free safety, and he was graded out as one of the best safeties in the NFL. He was ranked 8th out of 98 according to PFF, an elite coverage safety, and just having him and Kyle Hamilton out there gives you one of the best safety duos, if not the best safety duo in the NFL. And he just didn't really play a lot in his first 3 years in the league. And now he looks like he's going to be a mainstay on this Ravens defense. So shout out to the undrafted TCU Horned Frog from that 2021 draft, really developing into one of the best safeties in the NFL. It's a really cool story. I struggled on who to pick here for the Buffalo Bills. So Bills fans, you can let me know who was your breakout player this season. Do you think it's just Josh Allen somehow? I mean, maybe if they end up winning the Super Bowl, you could go with Josh Allen, but I'm going to go with Khalil Shakir, who ended up being this team's wide receiver 1, a lot better than their midseason pickup, Amari Cooper, better than their highly touted draft pick, Keon Coleman, better than Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid in the passing game as well. You could talk about James Cook, but Cook actually had less yards this year than he did last year. He just had 16 touchdowns compared to his 2 in 2023. And Shakir had a really good statistical season. Throughout 15 games, he had 76 catches on 100 targets. He had 821 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. He did have 6 catches for 67 yards, including a long 34-yard catch against the Baltimore Ravens in their divisional win. And this is somebody who was a 5th-round pick in the 2022 draft, and he kind of broke out onto the scene last year, but I think he did take another step this year, and he's still incredibly young, just 24 years old, and I think could be a good wide receiver option for Buffalo for the long term. And honestly, he may be the wide receiver 1 for a while because I don't think Buffalo is going to look to add a highly touted receiver in this draft or in free agency, because it's working with Shakir as the 1 and Coleman as the 2. I think they're going to stay with that for the next few years, and Shakir has become a wide receiver 1 for one of the best offenses in the league. We're going to talk running back for the Carolina Panthers, and you got to talk about Chuba Hubbard, as Hubbard was splitting carries over the last few years with Donta Foreman and Miles Sanders, and this year he ran away as not just the best running back on the Carolina Panthers, one of the better running backs in the NFL. I don't know if he's a top 5 running back, but definitely a top 10 running back this year for the 25-year-old, where he had 250 carries, 1,195 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns as well. He was breaking tackles left and right, and averaging 80 rushing yards per game for one of the worst offenses to start off the year is a really impressive feat, and he got rewarded with a new contract as well by the Carolina Panthers. And just being one of the best running backs in the league this year, I think this makes total sense to go with Hubbard here for the Carolina Panthers pick, because I don't think Bryce Young fully broke out yet. I was torn on who I wanted to go with the Chicago Bears. This was kind of a tough one as well, because they didn't have a lot of breakout players. You could go with the corner, Kyler Gordon. I'm actually going to go with their year 2 offensive tackle, Darnell Wright, who was the 10th overall pick back in that 2023 NFL draft out of Tennessee. And Wright has emerged into being a cornerstone offensive tackle for Caleb Williams for the next 10 plus years on this team. He was graded out to be the 16th ranked offensive tackle according to PFF with a 79 offensive grade this year. That is up from a 62 grade last year. He played over 1,000 snaps for the Chicago Bears in 2024, and he is an elite run blocker. And I do wonder if this rushing offense is going to look a lot different next year now with Ben Johnson as the head coach. Is he going to try to implement some of the schemes that he had in Detroit over to Chicago? Most likely. Or are they going to try to go a 2 running back backfield, having DeAndre Swift with somebody else that they could draft? And Darnell Wright is going to pave the way for those guys as one of the best run blocking offensive tackles in the NFL. For Cincinnati, we're going to talk about somebody that emerged as their running back 1 throughout the year, was a lot better than Zach Moss, and obviously Moss got hurt, but that is going to be Chase Brown, who was the 163rd pick in the 2023 NFL draft, and he looked lost in his rookie year. He could not pass protect, he was missing reads, and he had a full offseason to work with Joe Burrow and figure out his role in the Cincinnati Bengals offense, and he was really good, specifically over the second half of the 2024 season. His final numbers were 990 yards and 7 touchdowns. He was an impactful receiving running back as well, with 54 catches on the year on 65 targets, 360 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. And like I said, played a lot better in the second half of the year, where he had really good games against the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the LA Chargers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And those are some pretty good run defenses as well that he went up against and performed. It wasn't a fun year for the Cleveland Browns. They didn't have a lot of players that played well in the 2024 season, but I do think they found their wide receiver 1 in Jerry Jeudy, a player they took a chance on in the offseason, trading for him from the Denver Broncos, and they extended him. And a lot of people, including me, were skeptical about that, and he played a lot better when Jameis Winston ended up becoming the starting quarterback when Deshaun Watson went down. The career high going into this year in receiving yards for Jerry Jeudy was 972 in the 2022 season. This year for the Cleveland Browns, he had career highs in receptions, targets, and yards. He had 145 targets, 90 receptions, and 1,229 receiving yards. He had 4 touchdowns. He was averaging 72 yards a game. But like I said, he was a lot better in the second half of the year when Jameis ended up becoming the quarterback. He was really good against New Orleans in the middle of November. He had that 235-yard game against the Denver Broncos on 9 catches and 13 targets. He had 11 catches and 108 yards against the Kansas City Chiefs. I know if you had him in fantasy, you're probably very happy about his performance in the second half of the year. But I do think Jerry Jeudy, for whoever is going to be the quarterback for Cleveland next year, if it's Deshaun, if it's Jameis, if it's Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers, he could be a safe wide receiver 1 for them. For the Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to talk about somebody that was drafted in 2023, didn't play at all in his rookie year, and this year, unfortunately, he did go down with an injury, but really looked like a cornerstone linebacker for them. That's the Marvion Overshown. Overshown played 13 games before suffering a season-ending injury, but he was flying around on all sides of the field. He had 90 total tackles, 5 sacks, 5 QB hits, 8 tackles for loss. He had a forced fumble and a fumble recovery, 4 pass deflections, and oh yeah, he had a pick 6 as well. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to look like fully healthy next year. Hopefully this Cowboys defense as a whole is a lot better, because I think he really stood out in what was really his rookie year in the league. Next up, I want to talk about the 64th pick in the 2022 NFL draft, selected by the Denver Broncos, Nick Bonito. You could also go with Quinn Miners for this pick as well, because he really broke out to being one of the best offensive guards in the NFL. But Bonito is going to finish in top 10 in Defensive Player of the Year voting. As an edge rusher, he had the best year of his 3-year career so far, where he was a Pro Bowler this season. He finished on the All-Pro second team. He had 16 tackles for loss, 24 QB hits. He had a pick 6 as well, 4 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, and 13.5 sacks. Yeah, the Denver Broncos really found a franchise edge rusher back in the second round of the 2022 NFL draft, and I think Nick Bonito can definitely compete for Defensive Player of the Year awards for years to come. There's a lot of players you could talk about for the Detroit Lions. I wanted to talk about Jahmyr Gibbs because I think he really elevated himself in terms of running back tiers, but I think it's a no-brainer as well. You got to go with Kirby Joseph, as he was one of the best, if not the best safety in the NFL this year. Joseph was the 97th overall pick in the 2022 draft, a loaded draft class for the Detroit Lions, and he was an all-pro first team member this year. He had 9 interceptions, led the NFL, 83 tackles at the safety position, 12 pass deflections. He had a pick 6, 83 total tackles, and had by far his best PFF grade of his career. He had a 64 grade as a rookie, 56 grade as a sophomore. He had a 90.4 grade this year. He was the best coverage safety. He was an elite run defender as well, and he really is one of the best safeties in the NFL. And for somebody that really wasn't an above average safety going into this year and turning into a top elite safety, yeah, that is definitely the criteria of players we're talking about in this video. Maybe Green Bay Packers fans already thought he broke out last year, but I think he really solidified himself to the national audience as one of the premier offensive tackles in the NFL, and that is Zach Tom. Tom was the 140th overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft. And like I said, it's one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. I think it's a little bit criminal that he didn't end up on an all-pro team this year or made a Pro Bowl. He was the 5th ranked offensive tackle out of 81 in the NFL, according to PFF. He was an elite run blocker, an elite pass blocker, and there's a reason why Josh Jacobs ended up playing so well for the Green Bay Packers this year, and a part of that is because of how elite Zach Tom was for the Green Bay Packers and protecting their franchise quarterback in Jordan Love. So Packers fans, you can let me know down below, did you think he already broke out? Do you think this was a big year for him, that he jumped into the top tier of offensive linemen? And do you think he was snubbed of a Pro Bowl or an all-pro team? So for the Houston Texans, I almost went with Nico Collins, because I think even with the injury, elevated himself into one of the best receivers in the NFL and put himself into a new tier. But I'm going to talk about somebody that was a high draft pick in 2023. It's not CJ Stroud by the Texans, and I think also had a great rookie year. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year in Will Anderson, but I think now he's just one of the best edge rushers and defensive linemen in the NFL. And Anderson is just 23 years old. Obviously, he was one of the best players in college for Alabama. Last year, he was great as well, but I think a part of this video is not just guys that went from nothing to something like Kirby Joseph or Darius Washington. It's also these guys like Will Anderson that went from really good to superstar in this league. And this year, Will Anderson was a superstar. I think it's also a little bit criminal that he didn't end up making a Pro Bowl or an all-pro team, because this year was better than last year, and he made a Pro Bowl team last year. This year, he had 11 sacks, going up from 7 last year, and he played 1 less game as well. He did have 37 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 6 more than last year in 1 less game, 19 QB hits, and a forced fumble, and he was graded out as one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, and he's just a blue-chipping edge rush prospect that turned into an elite edge rusher in the NFL. So Texans fans, you can let me know, do you agree with this one? Do you disagree? Do you think it would be Nico Collins or maybe somebody on the defense? It wasn't the best year for the Indianapolis Colts as a whole. Their offense was somewhat disappointing at times, but I think somebody that wasn't disappointing on that offense was year 2 receiver Josh Downs, because Downs had the best receiving season out of anybody on this Colts team, better than their 2nd round pick Adonai Mitchell, better than Michael Pittman, who got paid a ton of money. And Downs, who did have some injuries this year, had 800 yards, 5 touchdowns on 107 targets, and honestly at times was Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson's favorite target. Now you could also go with Alec Pierce as well, who turned into one of the best deep threats in the NFL and had over 824 yards on 37 catches. I was going back and forth between Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, but I feel like Josh Downs is turning into one of the best smaller receivers in the NFL. It wasn't a good year for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they're not having a good offseason so far because they fired Doug Peterson, but the owner did not want to fire Trent Baalke, the GM, and that really ruled them out of getting guys like Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen. And then they fired Trent Baalke, and they can no longer get those guys. So yeah, not a good offseason start for the Jaguars, but I do think their breakout player from the 2024 season is not going to be Brian Thomas Jr. He was a rookie. You could go with him though. I'm going to go with Trayvon Walker, the #1 overall pick back in the 2022 draft. Now, in hindsight, they definitely made the wrong pick, but it's not like Trayvon Walker is a bust by any means or is a bad player in this league. He had, once again, another good year and another double-digit sack season for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had 10.5 sacks on the year, 61 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, 15 QB hits, and 13 tackles for loss. He had 60 QB pressures on the year and was one of the best run defenders in the AFC as well this year. So like I said, probably wouldn't go #1 overall in a 2022 redraft. They'd probably take another edge rusher that went right after after him out of Michigan, but I do think Trayvon Walker is still a good player and had the best year of his 3-year career this season. Trey Smith definitely had the best year to have the best year of his career, and the former 6th round pick has just been an elite offensive guard, and I think also elevated himself into a new tier of offensive line play this year. You could pick some other players on the Kansas City Chiefs, so Chiefs fans, let me know if you would pick somebody different here, but Trey Smith is going to be a free agent, and he has earned himself a lot of money. PFF had him graded out as the 12th ranked offensive guard out of 75 in the NFL, an absolute elite run blocker in this league. And it does help out that he's got some great offensive linemen next to him in Creed Humphrey and Joe Thuney, but the Chiefs tackle play wasn't great this year. But I do think Trey Smith had the best year of his career. And like I said, perfect time because he's about to be a free agent. And we saw how much money Robert Hunt got from the Carolina Panthers. Trey Smith is about to get a lot more money than we think. I had no idea who to go here for the Las Vegas Raiders. They just didn't have a lot of standout players this year, but I'm just going to go with interior offensive lineman Jordan Meredith, who played 574 snaps this year for the Las Vegas Raiders, and he was an elite pass blocker and an elite run blocker at the interior offensive line position. He did miss some time, but just being the 6th graded offensive lineman out of 75 at the guard position, according to PFF, he had a 63 grade in 2022, 60 grade in 2023, and an 80 grade here in 2024. And that's pretty cool to see from an undrafted offensive lineman as well, out of Western Kentucky. He only made $915,000 this year, which is a steal for his production. He's about to be a restricted free agent. Hopefully he's going to get a nice payday by the Las Vegas Raiders. For the LA Chargers, we're going to talk about somebody that I think everybody loved to talk about this year and had an incredible year on the defensive side of the ball, and that is going to be Poona Ford, who was an undrafted player back after the 2018 draft. He did bounce around in Seattle and Buffalo for a little bit, but definitely had the best year of his career this season for the LA Chargers. As a defensive tackle, had 3 sacks. He had 9 QB hits, 8 tackles for loss. He was graded out as the 5th graded defensive lineman out of 126 according to PFF, by far the best grade of his career, playing notable snaps, over 650 on the defensive line, an elite run stopper who's about to be an unrestricted free agent at 29 years old. And we saw how much money Christian Wilkins got from the Raiders last offseason. Poona Ford's about to get a nice payday. Staying in Los Angeles, let's just talk about one of the best day 2 picks from the 2023 draft for the LA Rams, and that is going to be Kobe Turner, who had another elite year on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, he finished 3rd in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting. This year, he had a much better year, started almost every game for the Rams that he played in, 8 sacks, 62 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 13 QB hits, played over 790 snaps on the year. He had 52 total stops, 48 QB pressures, and the Rams did it again, hitting on a day 2 defensive lineman pick. And he's no Aaron Donald, but he's not a bad replacement for him in the long term. A disappointing year for the Miami Dolphins for sure, and you could maybe go with somebody on the defensive side of the field, but I'm going to go with somebody that was drafted back in 2017. He was the 100th overall pick, and it's a tight end, and that's Jonnu Smith. So Jonnu Smith had some nice years in Tennessee. He got paid a lot of money in that 2021 offseason by the Patriots. Didn't really work out in New England. Had a productive year in 2023 for the Atlanta Falcons, but here in year number 8, he had by far the best year of his career. 111 targets, career high was 70 by the Falcons in 2023. He had 88 receptions, tops his career high by 38, and he had 884 yards. He had 8 receiving touchdowns and was one of the best receiving tight ends throughout the NFL season, and especially in the second half of the year. Mike McDaniel and this Miami Dolphins offense was running up a lot of plays specifically targeted for Jonnu Smith, over Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I don't think it made a ton of sense, but as a Jonnu Smith fantasy owner, I definitely enjoyed watching it. For the Minnesota Vikings, this was one of the easier picks in the whole video. I'm not sure if he's going to win Comeback Player of the Year because they changed that award around in the meaning of that, but it's Sam Darnold. It's a no-brainer. Darnold was a Pro Bowler this year, and in 17 games, he won 14 of them for the Minnesota Vikings and earned himself a lot of money here in free agency, as this was just a one-year deal in Minnesota. He played great under Kevin O'Connell. Yeah, he maybe lost himself a little bit of money in their Week 18 loss against Detroit or their first round exit against the LA Rams, but he still had an incredible season. 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, over 4,300 passing yards. And like I said, just winning 14 games in the best division in the NFL and showcasing that he could be a good quarterback in this league. And he's still just 27 years old. I know he's been around since 2018, but he's still just 27 and he could be somebody's franchise quarterback. Maybe he's not going to be an elite quarterback, but hey, the fact that we're having these Sam Darnold conversations when we thought his career was over is more than impressive. Not a great year for the New England Patriots. I don't believe that anybody on the offensive side of the ball really broke out. So I'm going to talk about year 2 defensive end Keon White, who had 56 tackles this year for the Patriots. He had 5 sacks, 5 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, and 16 QB hits. He also had 51 QB pressures on the year and had a really nice QB pressure rate of 12.5%. Not bad for the 46th overall pick in the 2023 draft, and really looks like a true foundational building block for this Patriots defense under new head coach Mike Vrabel. I really have no idea who to talk about for the New York Giants. I was going to talk about Kayvon Thibodeau, but I'm just going to spend this time talking about Malik Neighbors and his rookie season. I know it's tough to say somebody broke out in their rookie year, and there's one other rookie we're going to get to later in this video, but yeah, I just had no idea who to pick for the Giants. A lot of their better players this year were also rookies like Drew Phillips or Tyler Nubin, along with Malik Neighbors and Tyron Tracy on the offensive side of the ball. And Neighbors this year had just a monster season in year number 1. Just shout out to that LSU team last year with Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors. How did they not win a national championship? I'm looking at you, Brian Kelly, as Malik Neighbors in his rookie season with Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, and Tommy DeVito throwing him the football, had 109 receptions on 170 targets, 1,204 receiving yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns, all as a 21-year-old in the NFL. He's already one of the best receivers in the NFL, and going into year number 2, hopefully with the better quarterback, either it's through the draft or free agency or trades, Malik Neighbors could even top his already star-studded rookie season. You don't normally see this happening, as Baltimore ended up letting go a really good interior offensive lineman, as John Simpson was a breakout player for the New York Jets in 2024. The Jets had a lot of disappointment and a lot of issues on both sides of the ball, but John Simpson signing a 2-year deal worth $12 million was one of the best value signings of the 2024 offseason, as Simpson had by far the best year of his career. He was the 11th graded offensive guard out of 75 according to PFF, an elite run blocker, a really good pass blocker, and for someone that just has a base salary of $4.9 million in 2025, it is one of the best value contracts for interior offensive linemen in the NFL, and that's what they need, trying to give Breece Hall and Braylon Allen some better opportunities next year in 2025. I also had issues picking my New Orleans Saints, so I'm just going to talk about somebody that kind of broke out for a little bit through 6 games. I just haven't really had the chance to talk about him on the channel, but I think emerged as a good wide receiver too, and that is Rashid Shaheed. So unfortunately, Shaheed did go down with a season-ending injury after 6 games, but he did emerge, like I said, as one of the best deep threats in the NFL, as he was averaging 58 yards per game, with Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler throwing him the football. I know his breakout year was more so last year, but I think the pace that he was on throughout the first 6 games showed that last year wasn't a fluke, and he could just be a really good deep threat for years to come for the Saints, whoever their quarterback is going to be. But Saints fans, you can let me know, would you have went with somebody else other than Rashid Shaheed? Do I talk about Clint Kubiak? Was he their breakout player this year? Or is it somehow Taysom Hill? Because every year we're still talking about him throughout the regular season. It still makes no sense to me. I think maybe the biggest breakout star going from nothing to something in 2024 has to be Zach Bond of the Philadelphia Eagles. I could have talked about Cam Jurgens or a couple other guys on the defensive side of the ball, but Zach Bond turning into one of the best linebackers in the NFL after being a special teams player last year for the Saints is truly incredible. This year, Bond was a Pro Bowler, All-Pro first team member, 151 combined tackles, 3.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, 4 pass deflections, 11 tackles for loss, 5 QB hits, was flying around all over the field this year, started every single notable game for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024, and they picked him up on a 1-year flyer deal in the offseason. He was so good, they may have to tag him. I don't know if Philadelphia can afford for Bond to leave in free agency, but either way, he has made himself so much money after his 2024 campaign. I think I'm going to talk about the oldest player mentioned in this video, and that is for my Pittsburgh Steelers. And I feel like nobody really broke out this year. It wasn't Fields, definitely wasn't Russ, not Najee, Warren, George Pickens, or Pat Freiermuth. The offensive line, the guys that did stand out were rookies in Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick. So I'm going to talk about somebody on defense. Now, you could talk about Deshaun Elliott, but he's had, I think, better years in the past. Like I said, one of the more older players talking about in this video, Landon Roberts, a player the Steelers have to re-sign in the offseason. I think Nick Herbert could also have been a pick for the Steelers, but Landon Roberts honestly was one of the more impactful, high motor, high energy guys on the defensive side of the field for the Steelers, and they didn't have many of those guys. He was a 6th round pick by the New England Patriots back in 2016, spent 4 years in New England, the next 3 in Miami, and the last 2 in Pittsburgh. But like I said, I believe in year number 9 had the best year of his career, which is really cool to see. He had a 79 PFF grade, highest of his career, just an elite run stopper. And that's why the Steelers' run defense at times struggled in the second half when he was not utilized best or he was banged up. Because at 30, I believe that Landon Roberts played the best football of his career, and I do believe the Steelers have to re-sign him in the offseason. They can't let him walk. A lot of disappointing players for the San Francisco 49ers this year, but somebody that was just super reliable for this offense and Brock Purdy. is Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings posted career highs across the board and had a really good season after having a great Super Bowl performance last year against the Chiefs. This year, he had 113 targets throughout 15 games, 77 catches, 975 yards, and 6 receiving touchdowns. Remember, he had that monster performance earlier in the year against the Rams, where he had 11 catches for 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. They re-signed him last year. It was a home run signing. They signed him last offseason. It's incredible value right now. And with Debo, Ayuk all being banged up and what happened to Ricky Pearsall in the offseason before the season started, Juwan Jennings was a very nice, reliable receiver for the Niners in their disappointing season. I think people were iffy if this player was going to break out in year number 2 after somewhat of a disappointing rookie season because he had high expectations going into it. And that is Jackson Smith-Njigba of the Seattle Seahawks, who is turning into an elite receiver already at just 22 years old. JSN emerged as the wide receiver 1 for this team throughout the year. He got involved more at times than DK Metcalf and definitely Tyler Lockett. He had 100 catches on 137 targets, 1,130 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns. He averaged 66 yards per game. But like a lot of these guys, really stepped it up in the second half. 180 yards against the Seahawks, 110 yards against the Niners, 83 against the Packers, 95 against the Vikings, and was just targeted a ton by Geno Smith throughout the year. And if it's Geno Smith or not next year, I think JSN is going to finish as the wide receiver 1 again in Seattle, even with DK still being there. For Tampa Bay, I wanted to talk about Bucky Irving, but I'm going to talk about Zion McCollum because I didn't want to talk about too many rookies in this video because you're not really breaking out in year number 1, unless you're like an insane exception, and there's still one more rookie we're going to get to. Turned into a really good corner option for the Buccaneers throughout this season. He played over 1,000 snaps at wide and was one of the best coverage corners in the NFL. He had a top 50 grade out of 116 according to PFF. He was a 5th round pick out of Sam Houston back in 2022. Shout out to KC Keeler, as he's now the head coach of my Temple Owls. But yeah, just shout out to Zion McCollum and his 2024 season, the best year of his career by far. I also have no idea who to put for the Tennessee Titans. I feel like they were just so disappointing as a whole on both sides of the field. I'm going to give some love, though, to Darrell Baker, who was undrafted out of Georgia Southern in 2022, and he turned into a serviceable corner for the Titans. I don't know if it was because L'Jarius Sneed looked so bad, Darrell Baker looked even better, but he played over 570 snaps out wide at corner. He was a key special teams player for them as well, and on 36 targets this year, just allowed 18 catches for 262 yards. I don't think Darrell Baker is a really good corner. I just didn't think there was many options for Tennessee this season. So Titans fans, you can let me know. And yeah, you could probably go with a couple players on the Washington Commanders, but I just wanted to spend some time to talk about Jaden Daniels and what he's doing right now. It may go down as the greatest rookie season we have seen from a quarterback in NFL history. If you can somehow upset the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend on the road in Philadelphia, yeah, I think it's hands down the best rookie quarterback season we have seen of all time, because guys like Joe Flacco, Ben Roethlisberger, who won a lot of games as rookies, they were kind of carried from their defense, as the Commanders' defense is solid, but it's not great. And Jaden Daniels is doing so much with De'Ami Brown, Noah Brown, Zacchaeus, all as his wide receiver 2s. He's won 14 games this season, including 2 playoff wins against the Bucs and the biggest upset of the playoffs so far against the Lions. 3,500 passing yards throughout the regular season, 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, was also elite as a quarterback rusher as well, as he ended up having 890 rushing yards on the year and 6 touchdowns as well. He played through multiple injuries, and like I said, has just been an unreal player for this team in the playoffs. Is a perfect quarterback for Dan Quinn over there in Washington, and it's just a really cool story, as this team was looked at as like the laughingstock of the NFL not too long ago. Dan Schneider sells the team. They get a new front office. Ron Rivera is gone. Dan Quinn is in. And now they have one of the best futures in the league because of this breakout superstar in Jaden Daniels. And you may already say he's the best quarterback in the NFC. I think if he somehow goes to the Super Bowl, or let alone wins it, he may be a top 4 quarterback in the NFL. So yeah, that's gonna be it for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you agree or disagree with any of your favorite teams' picks, please let me know down below. If you did enjoy, I would appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. And if you're dropping a thumbs up, hey, hit that subscribe button as well if you are not, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.